Hello, everyone, and today I'm going to be talking about, recapping, and reviewing Big Brother All Stars, otherwise known as Big Brother 7. This is the season that I always liked, but I never really loved, and I feel like I love it less and less the more and more research I learn about it, especially with the pre gaming that happened, all the outside beefs, and some of the production stuff that ended up happening. So they wanted to do an all-star season going back to Big Brother 6 after the success of Big Brother 5. And once they saw the ratings decline from Big Brother 5 to Big Brother 6 and the online popularity of some of the house guests of Big Brother 6, they decided that it would be a good time to do an all-star season, especially since Survivor did their all-star season 2 to 3 years earlier. Honestly, I do have an issue with a decent amount of the casting, which is why I never loved the season as much as I wanted to. And due to all the preseason behind the scenes stuff, the edits for a lot of the weeks are pretty inaccurate from what I could tell. Despite that, it was cool seeing the best characters, the best strategists, and the most iconic figures of the Big Brother Pantheon up until this point all interact and be together, and there is a decent amount of drama, a lot of interesting gameplay, and a lot of humor as well. So, despite some of my issues with the season and just not really caring for the All Stars concept in general, I do like the season, and it's a great way to close this first era of Big Brother USA. I found week one to be pretty solid, especially with seeing how people who are on the same seasons interacted here, how they interacted with people that are in different seasons, and learning a bit of how the interactions were like in the outside world, and how they thought of one another, and how they played on their seasons. There were some interesting strategic ideas that were implemented here, but it ends up with a result that I kind of wish didn't happen. And while the strategic idea was interesting, I just wish they left it alone since we would have had an easy first boot that no one really cared about. So Diane, Nokomis, Jace, Janelle, Howie, James, and Kaser are voted in the house by the audience, though some people have said that the voting was fake, and it's so not a coincidence that all the people voted in were from the two most recent seasons, as well as Erica. George, Will, Mike, Danielle, Marcellus, and Allison were chosen by the producers to enter the house. Diane throws shade at Erica being voted in since she didn't do much of anything on her season and doesn't consider Erica an all-star. Nokomis doesn't think that she'll get along with the other three women voted in, though one of them is Diane. Erica and Jace immediately notices all the BB6 numbers in the house, and we have a teasing interaction between him and Uncle Miss, where Howie also talks about all their boobies, which, his shtick is already getting old here. We do have an awkward interaction between Marcellus and Danielle, since they are not over what happened in Season 3, where Allison and Erica pretend to miss one another, though Erica doesn't think Allison changed, and Allison isn't looking forward to it. Apparently, while hosting house calls during BB5 and BB6, Marcellus always mentioned that if he was on another season with Danielle, he would get her out immediately, and I'm sure that got back to her in some way, shape, or form. Will and Mike are more confident and cocky than ever, and Mike immediately mentions that he wants Kaser gone due to being a smug shit, and thinking that he is cocky due to being a fan from last season. To be fair, it's mostly Mike ranting and raving, though Kaser thinks that there will be a battle between him and Will, which is just so hilarious, and it shows how superior Kaser thought of himself at this point in time. We have the first HOH competition, and two people are going to share the HOH, where they have to target one another, which reveals a lot. Nokomis targets Howie, Danielle targets Marcellus, Kaser targets Mike, who claims to have thrown it since he's so traumatized by being the first HOH and what happened in BB2. Janelle targets Erica, Nokomis targets James, Diane targets Will, Danielle targets Marcellus but misses, though Jace ends up pushing the rock onto Marcellus, and Jace becomes the first HOH, which he was in BB5. I think he's the only person in Big Brother history to be the first HOH twice. Howie targets Nokomis, Will targets Kaser for having an undeserved arrogance, James targets Diane, Marcellus targets Danielle, Jace targets Janelle, Erica targets George, and Howie targets Danielle, causing Janelle to be the first HOH along with Jace. It's clear that BB5 and BB6 were planning on targeting one another, and now they have to agree on nominations, or else they will be nominated, since that's the twist. Jace is talking about how much he has changed since Big Brother 5, since he now has a girlfriend and a future stepdaughter, so he isn't playing for himself this time. Will mentions that being HOH isn't an advantage and he would never sleep in the HOH room since it isolates himself from the house. Janelle and Jace have no idea who to nominate, though she does mention Chicken George. Danielle speaks to Allison and Chicken George about a plan, since no one has approached her, which also happened in BB3, since when something comes up to her mind strategically, she needs to let it out. She tells them that maybe they should hope that they don't come to an agreement, and it would make sense for Jace to not agree, so they can vote out Janelle. Allison counts the numbers to boot her, but is confused that Danielle wants to tell Janelle, so it has her thinking that Danielle is working with Season 6, though Danielle keeps it vague about who would be taken out after the nominees. Danielle speaks about this to James, whom she may or may not have been in a preseason alliance with, but he feels like he's being used. Allison tells Jace and Diane whom Allison might have been in an alliance with, since she wanted to tell Diane first, and Mike was in that group as well. Jace mentions that he thinks Danielle is with Season 6, and while he trusts Allison to boot Season 6, he doesn't want this plan to go around, and for Janelle to know that Jace was aware of it, and he doesn't want to be on the block. James is already telling Kaysar and Janelle when Jace enters the room to tell them, and he knows that they're together since he saw the three of them together. Janelle is shocked since she was not eyeing Danielle whatsoever, and Jace is trying to be a floater. James mentions in the diary room that he trusts Jace more than he does Kaysar and Janelle. Put a pin on this for later. But he tells them that while Danielle might be a friend of his, he feels like she sold him out. Jace and Allison have a conversation where she mentions that she would understand why he wouldn't want to go with the plan as HOH, but he does have the numbers. Jace tells Allison that he is down with her, Diane, Nokomis, as well as Will and Bucky, and I'm wondering if this was a part of that preseason alliance stuff that was spoken about with those first four names. Jace tells her that all four of them in Season 6 are together. Will mentions that he's going to be nominated, and so is Mike, but no one's really checking for them. Janelle and Jace nominate Allison and Danielle for eviction. Of course, Allison and Danielle throw one another under the bus to the Softs and Jace after the nomination ceremony and are covering their asses, though they are told that the HOHs were going to send Chicken George home. And I wish they would have just left it alone so that could have happened, and we would have had a more interesting result later on. They end up having another conversation with them separately to throw one another under the bus even more, and Jace notices that Allison and Danielle came up together, and Danielle stayed after Allison left to throw Allison under the bus. Danielle, in their conversation, mentioned that she threw out a scenario, but didn't commit since she isn't dumb, and Allison, in her conversation, mentions that she just reported what was told to her. And we have Allison rant about Janelle, since she did this in BB4, and Danielle doesn't know what to do since she's never been nominated before. Allison and Danielle actually respect one another and feel like they're screwed, but Danielle's plan is to be silent while Allison talks her way out of the house. Jace wants them to be going at it, which makes sense from his point of view and why he ended up nominating them. We have a weird segment of how he's flirting with Will and trying to be his friend, while Will whips into him, which will be consistent all season. Will is trying to infiltrate Season 6 by the supposed bond with Howie. Allison spies on the HOHs downstairs in the HOH room, and she knows that they are talking about her, and she also takes a dig about Janelle not needing more food and calling her Busto. Chicken George has no idea where the diary room is, and it's a pretty funny segment. Howie, James, and Janelle talk about how they need to stick together, but James mentions that if they see others grouping up, they need to join in so they don't plot together, and so the Softs won't isolate themselves. Nokomis talks to people about the Season 6 players being together, and Will speaks to Danielle and Diane about it, where Danielle mentions that Jace should have disagreed. Marcellus, Erica, and Janelle are in that HOH room talking, and Janelle mentions here that she wants Allison gone, and of course Erica and Marcellus are making the pitches about why their person should be gone, their person being the person from their season. But Marcellus also mentions that Danielle is incapable of winning competitions, unlike Allison, but for revenge reasons he wants Danielle gone as soon as possible. They take Yvette's ghetto slide from last year and replicate it this year. The house is told about the changes for the power of veto, where the other players are chosen by random choice instead of it being selected by the HOH and nominees. They are clearly tired of the Jace and James backdoors that happened in the last 2 seasons and don't want a repeat of that, and this change has remained up until today. Janelle ends up winning the veto, though Jace claims he threw it so she can have a bigger target. Both Allison and Danielle think that they are going home, but Janelle mentions that Allison scares her. Will throws Marcellus under the bus, mentioning that he said that James and Danielle are working together, but it caused him to think that maybe Danielle and Marcellus are together. James is told this and mentions that they should put Will up, in a pathetic attempt by the editors to build suspense. Janelle, of course, does not use the veto. Danielle is trying to lay low and being quiet, though she has a few talks with people like Chicken George, and Allison campaigns to Nokomis, where the latter mentions that she wants herself, Allison, and Diane to be a trio, which is very interesting and might have some further proof of them pre-gaming, though Diane has denied it, but we'll get more into that later. Danielle goes to Janelle and mentions that she isn't going after season 6, where Janelle tells her that the house is split, since season 6 and Erica want her to stay. Will, Mike, and Jace talk about who they want to go, where Will mentions that no one likes Allison, which shows that Allison's social game is poor even in this season, like it was in BB4, while people like Danielle actually, but Allison can be their warrior if they keep her. Jace has a mini conversation with Allison in the washroom about how she has him, Diane, Nokomis, Will, and Mike trying to keep her, which Allison repeats to Diane, where the latter mentions that she needs to get Marcellus's vote in addition to Chicken George's. Jace has mentioned that group of people more than once, so I'm wondering if he wanted all of them to be in some sort of alliance. Allison approaches James for his vote and mentions that there are 3 votes she will never get, which are Kesar, Howie, and Erica, because she's going after them, but he thinks she is dumber than he realized, since he is with season 6, but she doesn't seem to think so. James wants Allison out of the house, and James has a conversation with Bucky where he wants to keep Danielle, as Allison mentions that she has the majority vote, which she doesn't, which Allison is trying to overhear the conversation from the other side of the door, but it makes Mike worry of James and his intentions. Danielle and Nokomis have a conversation about her bad reputation from Big Brother 3, and she breaks down in the dining room about it. Marcellus, Erica, and Janelle have a conversation about how he cannot vote to keep Danielle, but they all know about the potential for Allison to join up with Mike and Will. We're getting a segment about how Jace is more likable in and outside of the house this season compared to Big Brother 5, where he mentions that he's a lot more refined, hoping that the bigger personalities implode on themselves so he can slide by, is trying to lay low, and is more behind the scenes, where he is playing every single side. Allison is evicted in an 8-2 vote. During Allison's short time in the house this season, I actually really enjoyed her, and I think the season would have been better had she stayed, but ultimately she overplayed heavily with not only telling people Danielle's idea, which brought a lot of attention onto her, but she lied about a lot, turned people off with her lies, and pretended like she had more votes than she already did. And people were mentioning that if she stayed, she would have been put up again, so it's clear that she didn't have much traction in the season. Though I definitely do think her association with Diane and Jace bit her in the butt. Overall, Allison's always going to give something as a character, and she is someone that when she's lit up, she just goes and goes, but she never had that fire lit up, and she was snuffed out pretty early. Ultimately, I think it's a shame that she went home early, despite my prior issues with her in the past. Week 2 is an utter bore and easily the most boring week of the season. I'm not even going to pretend like there's some intrigue here. Let's just get through this. So we learned that Marcellus was told by the Souths that they would help him get rid of Danielle if Allison goes first. Danielle kisses up to season 6, and Diane and Nokomis are not happy since they were the only ones who didn't vote out Allison. Apparently the votes switched after the two of them voted already. Kesar ends up winning the HOH, and the Sops obnoxiously celebrate. Jace compares it to how the Horsemen celebrated when Ju won HOH in BB5, and mentions it in a negative light. James did not want to hug them because he wanted to distance himself, and the other 3 are speaking about how Nokomis should go. Howie specifically mentioned her name, and Janelle brings up Chilton. Will thinks that he and Mike are going to be nominated, since neither of them spoke to Kesar in 10 days, which should have been a clue to Kesar. Will and Kesar have an awkward conversation about cosmetics and surgery, and they both think that the other is a know-it-all. I guess this is the first time the HOH room changed each week, since everyone comments about it when Kesar's HOH room looks different than Janelle and Jace's. Howie and Kesar talk about how the latter beat Nokomis in chess, claiming that Nokomis doesn't think ahead, and Howie mentions that in BB5, Nokomis laid back for a few weeks before taking Jace out and running the season. Janelle joins them, and they're annoyed that James isn't with them. James ends up in the HOH room, and he speaks about how Jace is completely with Cheltan, but Janelle and the other Souths don't see it, since he helped them last week. It's interesting that James thinks his way about Jace and the others don't, especially since the roles will reverse in the following week. Overall, they're thinking about putting up one person from each pair, the pairs being Chilltown and Diane and Nokomis. We see some slight Erica and Kesa flirting, but it ends up with her talking about her breakup with Josh from BB1, who dumped her a month or two before this season, and they dated for 5 years, meaning that they were dating while she was on Big Brother 4, but it was never mentioned on the episodes. I would assume she talked about it on the feeds, but no one really mentioned it. Diane and the Comis don't think that they're in trouble and criticize Season 6 for obnoxiously celebrating like that, since they outed their alliance, but we learn that, of course, Nokomis and Diane are working together, which, duh! After more Howie and Will banter that I don't give a flying F about, Chilltown talks about offering Kesar a 3-week safety deal, and Jace is with them, where he reports this to Janelle, who still thinks that Jace is loyal, and he tells Chilltown that he was giving Janelle a bunch of curveballs. Will admits that he likes Jace and is thinking about giving him an honorary Chilltown badge. We learn that Boogie is considering Diane to be one of his potential showmances. Thank goodness this didn't end up happening. And we are introduced to Slop for the first time in Big Brother history. Kesai speaks with Chilltown and mentions that they should work together to get the stragglers out, though Chilltown doesn't trust Kesai at all, so it's a deal to not trick one another. Kesai nominates Nokomis and Diane for eviction. A lot of people are not pleased with Kesar's nominations, and Janelle mentions that Kesar shouldn't have nominated Nokomis. She didn't mention Diane, because it's clear that she doesn't like her. Diane and Nokomis are of course not pleased, since their alliance is full of two people who are not intimidating anyone. Diane starts to have somewhat of a meltdown about how her brain cells aren't as strong because she smokes too much pot. Nokomis knows that Diane has a tendency to make people feel sorry for her, and people feel for that, so she knows that she has a rough ride if she wants to make it through the week over Diane. Boogie lies to Diane about not making a deal with Kesar, and Chilton makes fun of him for not nominating them. We see James and Jace bond about being 30 and how it seemed so old, the age of 30 seemed so old when they were younger, and how much they changed since the last times they played. Most of the house talks about how Season 6 needs to go, and how one of them needs to win HOH to do it, though he mentions in the diary room that he will nurture this and sit on the sidelines. I believe Will mentioned this. Erica is also kind of close to Season 6, but like Jace, she knows that she'll be on the outs with them. Diane talks about how she needs money and how she might leave California if she is booted soon, meaning before sequester, since she is directionless and isn't as strong as she thought she was. It's honestly really sad watching Diane this season, and knowing the backstory of that. Nokomis ends up dyeing her hair, and people mention that she's struggling to fit in, and of course Howie needs to make fun of her looks for some reason. And apparently he did this a lot on the feeds, where he wanted to hate her due to it, which I'm so glad that didn't happen. Especially because she did nothing to deserve it, and it shows that Howie's a real a-hole. But benefited because of what side he was on last season. Janelle rants to the others about Kesar's nomination sucking, and she tells James and Howie that Kesar made a deal with them. James mentions that they could have made that deal with Diane and Nokomis, where they would have at least kept their word. Erica ends up winning the veto, though we learned that James threw it, so he wouldn't be seen as too threatening in comps like last season. Diane and Nokomis know that the veto isn't going to be used, since Erica and Kesar are close, and Diane is given a pep talk by Danielle, since she's never been on the block during a Thursday before either. Marcellus tells Kesar that Erica should use the veto and boot one of Chilltown, where James tells them that a bunch of the house is talking about Season 6. Apparently there's a lot of drama and confrontation during this hot tub moment that was briefly shown on the show, but there was a lot more that happened on the feeds. But they only showed this non-event conversation with Kesar and Will, where the latter tells him to nominate him. None of this goes anywhere since Erica doesn't use the veto. Diane and Nokomis decide to not campaign against one another, and they think the house is spineless, especially when Erica gives them a weak explanation in private for not using the veto. Nokomis tells Diane that she won't be here, and Diane hopes that if Nokomis stays, to take out Janelle, who wants Diane gone. It seems like Erica wants to keep Nokomis since she is really smart and doesn't think Nokomis is targeting her. Danielle mentions that Season 6 is thinking about keeping Nokomis, and Jace mentions that Diane is a lot like Allison, smart and crafty but makes mistakes, and Nokomis thinks things through and is quiet. Janelle and Marcellus are in the hot tub, and we learn that they apparently have a final two together, where Janelle wants Diane gone, but Marcellus says that he can control her and that Chilltown needs to go. Nokomis makes a last-minute pitch to Season 6, where she tells them that she will work with them while wanting Chilltown out. Apparently, she told people afterwards that this was just fake on her end. While this is happening, Diane is making a pitch to the others that she will help them get Season 6 out. The alleged Mr. and Mrs. Smith alliance between Diane and Jace is finally addressed, and this was what was and will continue to lead the gameplay throughout the first part of the season. The house guests mentioned that the two never speak, Jace is infatuated by Brad Pitch, which we saw on Big Brother 5, and mentioned Angelina Jolie to Diane in the first HOH competition. Jace really badly denies his allegiance to Diane, as he stutters a lot, and they find him wanting Nokomis gone to be even more proof of it, where Janelle mentions that this is why Diane should go. We have a brief conversation between Diane and Jace, where she mentions that she thinks she has the vote, and they mention that they should pretend to hate one another. So apparently Diane's roommate at the time allegedly saw Diane and Jace speak about their plans for the season, and she told this to several of the house guests after she fell out with Diane. And due to this, all of the house guests came in with this opinion that Jace and Diane are aligned, and they brought in Allison and Nokomis. Nokomis is evicted in an 8-2 vote. So, Nokomis didn't have much to do this season, partially due to her association with Diane, but it's clear that she didn't speak to any other alumni and wasn't in that circle. And in addition to that, she didn't pregame, so she was always going to struggle. But just from what we saw of her on Big Brother 5, and from the little we saw of her here, she struggles socially, and it takes her a while to open up. And depending on the cast she is in, she won't open up well enough. And strategically, I can't even say much because she wasn't given much to do, but it seemed like she had a level head enough. And she was close to winning this HOH, and it would have been interesting to see what would have happened had she won this HOH. Overall, Nokomis was one of the more forgettable people on the season, but in general, she was just a deer in headlights, and she just really stood out and not in a good way, unfortunately for her. But I hate how a lot of the men talked about her on the season. Week 3 is definitely one of the more interesting weeks, especially of the pre-jury, but you could definitely tell there is some, I don't want to say heartbreak, but some sadness, especially with some of the house guests and how they react to certain things, and it's kind of psychologically interesting if you want to really delve into it. But overall, this is where things started to somewhat pick up, emphasis on somewhat. So Jace didn't bother getting off the couch when Nokomis left, and Janelle is clearly annoyed that Diane is still in the house. We learn that James and Howie voted against how Janelle and Kaysar wanted them to vote, since they felt safe with Diane and saw Nokomis as more intimidating. James ends up winning HOH, which, honestly, especially with what will happen here and in the future, James shouldn't have won, especially with Danielle being second place. And Danielle is getting ready to kiss some ass, though she had nothing to worry about. The Salves are of course very happy, and Will mentions that they might go up, since he did not like Kaysar's nominations last week, and James does have an ego. We get a segment of Chicken George's cleaning, and him eavesdropping, where James and Janelle were in the storage room, and James caught Chicken George listening through the door. The Salves talk about who to target, where Janelle and Howie mention that Jace needs to go, since he is strong and is targeting them. Remember that switch I mentioned last week about Jace, and how the Salves feel about him? Here's where it kind of happens. While James and Kaysar wants to target Chicken George, since he won't be an easy target for the floaters to nominate if they're in power, so they have to take a stand. The real reason for James is that he has a bunch of alliances and made a bunch of alliances with everyone else that isn't Chicken George. We get a segment of Boogie trying to work out so he can compete with the guys in the house and their bodies, and another segment of Will complaining all the time, though he claims it's for strategy, but I honestly don't believe it. James and Will speak about nomination, and James mentions that Chicken George is a target, and Will is wondering if he really wants to go home, since he will need another target. James is asking Will if he, meaning Will, really wants to go home, since that's what Will's been telling people throughout these last few weeks, and how he doesn't want to go to sequester. James mentions that he knows he is fourth in the Soft Alliance, and how it is really a trio, so Will brings up an alliance between himself, Boogie, James, and Danielle, though this might have been a pre-game alliance, where James hopes that this will become his core alliance. It's interesting that this is being talked about a few weeks before it actually becomes legit. Erica mentions to James that he should put up Jace and Chicken George, where everyone votes out Chicken George. Marcellus mentions that Chicken George should go, Danielle mentions that Chicken George is not his personal threat, but Jace is a complete wild card, though we will see her switch around at the end of the week, which is very interesting and unexplained. James wants Chicken George gone, since he will slide to the end game if he isn't gone soon, which is true, but Danielle mentions that if Chicken George is booted and Will stays, it will backfire, and it eventually does. Marcellus and Janelle whine about doing poorly in the food competition, and we see how close they have gotten. We have a segment of Danielle waking up early, and she talks about getting married with kids really early, at 16, which she mentions to Kesar while her friends at the time were hanging out at the club. She also talks about it to James, and Jace and Diane also question why she always wakes up early. James and Janelle talks about how Marcellus and Danielle want Jace gone, and they see the BB3 crew as their sub-alliance. Season 6 initially wanted to keep Jace around, but he became very shady, volatile, and shouldn't have ran to Cheltown. Janelle mentioned something very similar, since she feels like she should owe him for saving her in the first week, but his actions have spoken louder than words. What they don't show is that they mentioned a lot about the Mr. and Mrs. Smith alliance as a reason to justify him, but I guess they didn't feel like including that in the edit here. James nominates George and Will for eviction. James wants the floaters to take a side when they win HOH, so they can't target George, and Will doesn't really care if he goes home, and Will loves being nominated. Honestly, it's really annoying that they're calling everyone who didn't have a huge alliance entering the game floaters. And I don't even think that was the intention of all of these people that they're calling floaters, and a lot of them didn't even technically float, since they weren't going back and forth between two alliances. There's a really awkward conversation between George and James, but it's clear that they are two different people. Boogie wants Will to be vetoed and for someone else to go home, though even Danielle mentions to them that Chicken George is going home if the nominations remain the same. Jace and James has a conversation in the HOH room. Jace thanks him for not nominating him and mentions that he didn't go up to speak to him yesterday because he doesn't do the Kiss Ass game and everyone else was already doing it, but they bond about wanting the competitors to go to the end together, partially why James is targeting George. And they really bond about how they were the only two people up until this point who were backdoored, and how it sucks when they went through it. Pin this for later. James admits that Nokomis and Allison came to play unlike George. And the two of them call a truce where they mention that they want to go to the end together to battle it out. Marcellus lusts over Jace and especially Kesar. We learn that Marcellus and Erica are aligned, and they want to get rid of George, since he isn't contributing anything to the group and wouldn't win comps for them, but if Will's jugular is exposed, you don't have many chances to boot him. We have a segment of white boys Jace and George, the house guest words, not mine, rapping 8 Mile, and we get Jace's mirror face once again in the season, which everyone makes fun of. Howie and George are very close. This will become important later on as we get into the season, but he doesn't want to feel bad for people, since that didn't work out well for him last season. George warns Howie about the snake James. This is the first week where the house guest choice is an option, and Jace mentions in the diary room that he knows if Mike or Will wins it, he has a chance to go up as the replacement nominee, so he has that awareness. Chicken George ends up winning the veto, and of course James is livid, which he complained about for a very long time on the feeds, according to the reports and the YouTube clips online. The Savs immediately pushes for James to push and to put up Jace, and James really does not want to do it, since he wants to stick to his word this season, and mentions that he should vote out Will or Boogie, but they mention that Jace can win competitions. I guess they forgot how well Mike did in competitions in Big Brother 2. For some reason, Kesar ends up telling Jace that he's going up, but is confused as to why Boogie or Will aren't targeted. Jace is confused about this, where Kesar mentions that Boogie wouldn't go home over Will. Jace says that after he is gone, Will and Boogie will put something shady, and he's correct on this. What they don't show is apparently James and his allies came to an agreement where if he sends Jace home this week, then whoever wins HOH next out of all of the three of them have to split up Chilltown. This will be important for as soon as next week. Big Brother 5 Jace returns, where he rants about being backdoored, throwing cups and pillows around the backyard, and this was right before the veto ceremony where they are waiting outside, and tells James that he went with the bitch route, and James mentions that it's better for the team and not individually, and Jace went back and forth between the 6 and Chilltown. They argue about whether this is a backdoor or not, and this is interesting since in future seasons, people would say what happened to Jace is a backdoor, so the term gets twisted. Anyways, Howie mentions that Jace told Chilton stuff about them. Jace mentions that he didn't because that is a trap, which Danielle knows about, but Marcellus isn't good at. Marcellus doesn't like that his name was brought up, and the two of them start going back and forth. Jace rats Marcellus out about kissing their asses and goes to him about leaving to target Season 6. They go back and forth, and Marcellus mentions that now he understands why everyone in Season 5 hated him. And Jace pitches to James that the votes are there to boot Marcellus. Apparently, Jace and Chilton pitched to James earlier that he should boot Marcellus, and James was convinced for a bit. And honestly, James should have just sent home Marcellus, especially with what would happen afterwards. So the veto ceremony happens, and Will makes his staged "I hate you" speech. George vetoes himself, and James nominates Jace. Jace takes some shots at people after he's nominated and mentions that he would be better at Survivor. And this isn't his thing. Clearly, he's just very hurt. It's just lashing out. Will mentions that it is his strategy to make it seem like he wants to go, but he really wants Mike to get the votes for him to stay. George mentions that Jace needs to calm down, and we have a gross segment of Mike in the HOH bathtub with Janelle and Erica. Jace and Marcellus has a conversation that ends up turning into another argument, where he tells Jace to not go out like this, and Jace mentions that he's going out with a bang. Marcellus tells Jace that his actions are causing fear in people, which pisses Jace off because Will does the same thing with throwing stuff around the house, and he tells Marcellus to F off. Very dumb, since he needs Marcellus's vote to stay. And he might have actually had a chance to stay if he didn't do this fit of rage. He has a conversation with Diane and Danielle where they want to keep him. They mention that Chick and George could be a vote for them, but they need 2 more votes, which would be from Season 6. Jace ends up making a deal with Season 6 where they wouldn't go after one another until Sequester, which means for the next 2 weeks after this, and he tells Chilton and Danielle about it, which apparently causes Danielle to back off the campaign, since Jace would have to target floaters. Apparently, this wasn't really accurate, since from what the feed reported, James and Danielle kept on pushing for Jace to stay, so James and Jace clearly made up by this point, and it creeped the Softs out, since it shows that Danielle has influence over James. In his HOH chat with Julie, James mentions that Jace told him that his targets were Danielle and Janelle, which were 2 of James's closest female allies, so that played a part in him nominating him. Jace is evicted in a unanimous 9-0 vote. It seems like what we saw on Big Brother 7 is Jason, which is Jace's real name, where Jace put on more for the show in Big Brother 5, and the house guests actually liked Jason, since he actually had a good social game this time, but he did not handle being nominated or backdoored well at all, but his sloppiness definitely played a part into that. But he did learn a lot from his errors in Big Brother 5 and actively tried to improve on it. I found it interesting that in his exit interview with Julie, he compared himself to Marvin and how he was just on the out with everyone in Big Brother 5, and how he was kind of the linchpin to the Santa Monica Vanboy Alliance, which was Jace's role in Chilltown, so that comparison was interesting. In general, I definitely do think he was negatively impacted by the preseason mess that involved Diane, since his name was directly tied to her, and people were so threatened by their alliance, even though they didn't even get along, and they're nowhere near as good of a player, or have the good bond that Chilltown has. It actually kind of sucked seeing him get very emotional and sad during the end of his day. But outside of that, he delivered what he was cast to be, which is drama, good diary rooms, and some wacky moments, though there's much less of that here. Week 4 is kind of a bummer week, to be honest, as things are pretty grim, and at this point, I was tired of the Season 6 HOH run, especially since they kept on making stupid choice after stupid choice after stupid choice. Anyways, people are generally worked up and emotional over Jace's eviction, everyone but Martyr, Marcellus, and Howie, who mentions that Jace tried to play floater, and it was a strategic move to get him out. And Diane is hoping that this will dispel rumors of an alliance and to shrinking her target, which unfortunately doesn't happen for her. Marcellus goes on his righteous rant, but the house isn't here for it. Even James, who is still trying to justify his decision, since Jace to the HOH competition didn't compete to the best of his ability in the veto competition, and told him that he's targeting Janelle and Danielle, though James will change his mind about this as the week goes on. Janelle ends up winning her second HOH, and Marcellus is happy, though he thinks that she should have thrown it to him, since they have a deal with one another. Will mentions that Janelle is the only one out of the Softs that they have a relationship with, so it's why he targeted Howie instead of Janelle in the competition. We see the start of the flirtment between Will and Janelle here, though it could have influenced the Softs' decisions over the last few weeks prior. Janelle talks to her allies and mentions that there are 5 floaters, where she asks James about his relationship with Diane, where he says that he is fine with her. James wants Boogie to leave this week, since he's the biggest threat, and Kater explains that the floaters are counting the days to go after them. Why didn't James put Boogie up on his HOH, which just happened if he wanted Boogie out so badly? Anyways, Kaysar and Janelle are really pushing for Diane to go, since no one is associated with her and she's the most dangerous floater, which explains the last 3 evictees. James thinks that it is stupid, since Diane is the most timid player in the house and Chilltown is targeting them, which he clearly didn't think about last week, where Mike will target Janelle. But he sent Jace home last week instead of Mike. James mentions that he's building something with Danielle and Diane, and he tells Diane that she needs to do damage control with the Softs. Diane speaks to Janelle and mentions that people are telling her that they are after her, but she's by herself, and because of that, no one wants to trust her. They mention that Chilltown told them both things, and Diane is really hating having to kiss Asia, but it seems like the two of them made a truce, but not really. Will speaks to the Softs by using the rubber duckies in the bathtub, and this overall ends up with him pitching to nominate the floaters, which the Softs like. We have another segment of where Diane mentions that she likes Janelle, but knows that they have an oil and water relationship, and they are trying to cook. Chilltown really pushes the alliance of 6 with the Softs and themselves, and he volunteers to go up as a pawn, though after Janelle and Howie leaves, Mike mentions that they are getting played. He, wanting to go on the block, is Will, of course. Howie mentions to Janelle that Chilltown sucks, and they mention to James that the floaters are in an alliance of 5. James enters the HOH room and mentions that Danielle and Marcellus are with them, and Chilltown will gather the floaters to go after them, which is a correct read, mentioning that the house will be mad if Chilltown isn't up. Will knows that whomever speaks to Janelle last will influence her the most, so he mentions to put him up against the floater, but she doesn't want to put him up. He mentions that the Softs each have a parachute, where James has Danielle, Kaysar has Erica, Janelle has Marcellus, and Howie has no one. So they are all being scared and selfish, which is true. Will mentions to nominate Erica, and he throws James and Kaysar under the bus, but he promises that Boogie and himself will vote however she wants this week. Janelle nominates Mike and Erica for eviction. Erica is shocked that she is nominated, especially since she was good with the Softs up until this point, and has no idea if she's the pawn or the target, though Mike feels a bit double-crossed, though Will is happy that Janelle melts him halfway with the nominations. Janelle mentions that she's hoping Chilltown wins the veto, so she can send home a floater, though she immediately tells Erica that she isn't the target. It's clear that she is targeting Diane. Janelle tells Will and Mike that she wants Chilltown to win the veto, since she sees the floaters as better players as Chilltown, which is dumb on her part. And James pretends to be happy with the nominations. Marcellus, Diane, and Danielle mention that the quote-unquote floaters need to stick together, and the more of them that goes home, the worse it is for all of them. Janelle tells Howie before the competition that she doesn't want Diane or Erica to win the veto, and this has Howie confused. When the competition starts, Diane is immediately targeted over the nominees, making it clear that she is the target, and it all ends up with Mike Boogie winning the veto. Marcellus mentions to Janelle that she should put up Chilltown, though she tells him and Erica that she wants to put up Diane, which pisses Marcellus off, since even James and Kaysar want Will nominated. I didn't know about the Kaysar part. Where Chilltown is even more powerful because Mike won a competition, which Marcellus mentions to Janelle, and apparently they never expected Mike to win a competition. James is confused as to why they targeted Diane in the veto competition. I guess Diane told him that, and she tells them that she did not want Chilltown to win, though Howie admits that Janelle told him to target Diane and Erica. It is clear to James that Janelle is working with Chilltown and is going to target the floaters. Will mentions that no one will care if Diane goes, and that she's the main target of the floaters, where her alliance are fine with it. Janelle admits in the diary room that she should have thrown the HOH competition to Marcellus. Interesting insight there. Janelle tells James that she is nominating Diane, which pisses him off since he was told that if he sent Jace home last week, that they would send home Chilton this week or whomever or whenever they would win HOH next, where she mentions that she is doing what is best for her. He calls her out for mentioning her and not for the team. She lied to his face and he's going to play for himself now. He wakes Danielle out of her sleep and tells her that he is done with season 6 and wants to backdoor Janelle, so they need to lead a revolt, which Danielle is fine with, since she was waiting for James to play for himself. Ultimately, in my opinion, Janelle definitely is playing selfishly, and I think she's playing very, very personally, since she was obsessed with getting Diane out even back in week 2, where everyone else wants Nakomis out. But James is mad that he botched his HOH, where he targeted Jace, who wasn't after him, and someone he could have actually had in his back pocket for an alliance that he didn't even really care for. And because he didn't want to target Chilton himself, so him, Kesar, and everyone else in that alliance wants other people to target Chilton, but they don't want to make the move themselves. Mike vetoes himself, and Janelle nominates Diane as a replacement nominee. Diane is not shocked whatsoever that she is nominated, and Will calls Janelle a sucker for not nominating him, where he is going to drive the wedge between the Season 6 alliance even further. Danielle and James are willing to play dirty like they were on the original seasons, and Danielle mentioned that she has waited for James to play solo the entire season, so they want to unite the floaters to take them out, and it's clear that Danielle wants James to be her Jason for the season. Diane mentions that she was walking on eggshells with Janelle, who has been after her the entire season. The reason for this is because Janelle and the other Softs trashed Diane on the BB6 live feeds, mentioned that Drew was too good looking for that trailer trash bitch and stuff like that, where the other Softs apologized when Diane didn't show up to the BB6 rap party, but Janelle really didn't care, and Janelle targeted Diane and all of her supposed allies the entire season up to this point. Marcellus is not pleased since they're giving Chilton the entire game, and he tells Danielle and Erica that they are under attack, where Janelle wants to be the only woman around a bunch of men. Danielle calls her a vixen, and Marcellus mentions that Janelle was the last person in that group that he would have targeted, but now that has since changed. I do think that there is some truth to Janelle preferring men over women, as we've seen in her Big Brother journey this far, and as we will see in the future. Kesar is trying to play peacemaker, though he agrees with the move to take out Diane. It was the timing and the way that it was done, since James is pissed off. Danielle approaches Will and Boogie and mentions that James is ready to align with herself and the two of them so they can make a run for it. It's clear that there were discussions about the Legion of Doom forming before this, like way before this, but I guess the four of them didn't commit to anything until now. Will and Boogie laugh about this in the diary room, though of course they agree in person, because they tried to vote out Danielle in the first week. But to be fair, she did try voting Will out last week, so I guess they're even on that part. A bunch of people told Erica that they were voting to keep her when she was against Mike. Marcellus told Diane this, and Diane is bewildered that these promises were made before the veto competition even happened. Diane tries to campaign, but Erica always cock-blocks her conversations and sits down in the middle of the conversations. And I have to admit, this is a very good strategy. That nominee should use more often. Diane speaks to Danielle, who also hints that she promised her vote to keep Erica, and Danielle mentions that they made those promises when they were told someone else was being nominated. Danielle ponders how Janelle would react if Diane stayed, and she has a conversation with Mike, and he also mentions that he promised to vote Janelle's way, since it was the only way to save Will. Danielle speaks to James and mentions that Will doesn't care about his word, but Boogie does, and James has a conversation with Will where he mentions that it is clear that Diane is a gunner. Diane speaks to James about feeling handicapped because of Erica always showing up, but she will make Janelle's life hell if she stays. Diane is evicted in a 7-1 vote. It was really, really sad watching Diane this season and seeing how much of a shell she was. There was a lot going into this where apparently she got yelled at by Alison Guarner for alleged pre-gaming. Everyone was still threatened by her supposed alliance with Jace, in addition to her allegiances with Allison and Nakomis, and they kind of froze her out before the game even started. So she really didn't have a chance to play or to show what she could do. And it's also clear that she still had some insecurities from Big Brother 5, especially with being played by Drew, and there's also personal issues with not being able to live in LA comfortably in a financial position, and it was just sad to see her like this. Despite that, I do think Diane was still good socially. She had moments of strategic ability, especially during the Jace boot week, but ultimately she was the most handicapped person in the season and didn't have a chance to do much at all. So, due to this, she was still kind of a dud, but looking at it from a psychological point of view, it shows a lot. Things are definitely starting to look up when Week 5 takes place, in my opinion, since it's the first time where the South 6 aren't in power, and it's the start of the Legion of Doom really taking momentum. And I liked how Chotan started really playing and kicking it up into high gear this week, and there's just a lot of funny moments that happened here. Though it's still not a great week, and it's not a hugely standout week in the grand scheme of things. During the endurance comp, we get some filler content of flashback scenes, especially about Howie's weight gain. Will leaves the comp early and wants to bond with Janelle, since he wants to pick her up when Season 6 inevitably splits apart. Danielle wins HOH after a long endurance comp, and it's the first time Season 6 isn't in power, though she promises Howie safety so he could drop. James is happy that she won, and the Legion of Doom is officially in place, where she's relying on him, since he is her eyes and ears to their alliance regarding Season 6. Bucky is also thrilled, and they are all hoping that Janelle will be a goner this week. We get more filler about Will's back and people trying to massage him. The Softs are down, and James mentions that because the floaters are going after them, because she targeted them last week, and now they're scared, so the Softs have to pay the repercussions of that. They don't think she will nominate James or Kesar, and Howie was promised safety, so Janelle is hoping that she will have the votes to stay if she's against Marcellus. Speaking of Marcellus, he ends up giving Chicken George the slot pass since he's been on it since he won the veto 2 weeks ago and will continue to be on it for the rest of the season. Danielle tells James that she wants to nominate him because he's the veto king and he is her best chance at Janelle not winning the veto and staying on the block. He doesn't like the idea since being on the block means there's a chance that you can go home, but she mentions that he has Will, Buggy, and Erica voting to keep him, and it will disguise their alliance. Janelle thinks that she and Kesar will be nominated, but Danielle nominates Janelle along with James. Janelle thinks that Danielle is a bitch for nominating James. How lovely of her. And James is acting like he is shocked that he is nominated. Kesar and Howie seem shocked with the nominations, and Janelle is hoping to demolish Danielle next week. Marcellus mentions that people thought she had a deal with James, and she blew all that stuff out of the cosmos, which is exactly what Danielle wanted, and she's using this to get closer to Marcellus as well. Janelle has an inkling that James is a decoy, knew about it ahead of time, and is working with Danielle, which is a good read from Janelle, but Kesar shoots it down when she presents it to him. George mentions that he doesn't know if he can stay to the end, but he wants her to go to the end, where they bond over being the only parents in the house. And she mentions that she doesn't talk about her family here because they held it against her in her last season. People are getting more and more annoyed with Howie since he interrupts conversations and doesn't add anything to it. Apparently Kesar, as well as Howie, didn't want to be in the veto competition to choice. And remember last season where I mentioned that he did the same thing to Michael? It doesn't work out for him here. Anyways, Chotan works the veto in a way where it helps Janelle win, so Janelle and Danielle end up continuing to target one another, and it's really smart. And seeing Danielle's reaction to her allies being selfish in the veto competition and taking all the prizes is hilarious, but you feel really bad for her as well. Danielle ends up being in solitary confinement for 24 hours due to the punishment she took for the competition, and she's pissed at none of her allies, meaning Buggy, Will, James, and Marcellus, didn't go hard for the veto. This is the start of the punishments and other tasks being given as a result of veto competitions, which we'll see a lot more of in the next 2 eras of Big Brother. Janelle questions why James didn't go for punishment when he was on the block, and he claims that he tried to get the punishment but couldn't, as he stopped after the first 2 questions. Chilton calls James an idiot for going after the prizes since he's not safe and is still on the block, and Will mentions that Kesar will probably go up. They mention that after Season 6 is split up, people will target Chilton, so they need to set up Marcellus for taking all the prizes. And sending him home this week will give them another week to target Season 6. Will and Boogie set Marcellus up, where they tell Howie, James, and Janelle that Marcellus took all the prizes, and they need to pitch for Marcellus to go up. Will mentions that they should call a truce where they send Marcellus home, hoping Danielle supports them, and sending Chicken George home next week. Where this is a really good idea from Will. When Danielle comes out of her solitary confinement, Mike pitches for Marcellus to go up to send him home. Danielle speaks to Erica and calls them idiots. James makes the same pitch to put Marcellus up and mentions that himself and Chilton wants Marcellus gone, as Marcellus also promised Janelle to win the veto for her. James mentions that if Kaysar is gone, Marcellus will go after her next. This is the right move for the three of them, but Danielle is making the right move for her, since Marcellus isn't targeting her whatsoever, and she has him in her back pocket. Janelle vetoes herself, and Danielle nominates Kaysar as the replacement nominee. Kaysar is not shocked that he is nominated, and James is not happy that Kaysar is nominated, since it was Janelle's HOH week that ruined things last week. Kaysar makes his pitch to Erica, and she can't promise him anything since her name has been thrown out there, which hurts Kaysar since he has had her back when people threw her name out there and they've been close the entire season. James can nullify someone's vote due to what happened in the HOH comp, and he promises Janelle that he will vote Danielle out if she's on the block, which is a bold-faced lie. Kaysar makes a pitch to Chicken George and mentions how people treat one another is important. Kaysar makes a pitch to Mike about how the three of the Sobs drain up Chiltons to get the 4 floaters. On his birthday, Kaysar is evicted in a 5-1 vote. Okay, so overall, I do think Kaysar made some improvements in this game, where he definitely was better strategically, as he didn't just go all out and guns blazing. But there are also some issues where he still thought he was a lot smarter than he was, and he didn't pick and choose when to be passive and when to be aggressive at the right time. And in addition to that, his main issues are social, and he didn't bond with a lot of people socially, and he was still stuck on the side versus side thing. As a character, honestly, Kaysar was kind of boring this time, as they gave him a lot of the similar content, but there was nothing new to learn or to be added, and it just got kind of stale. And it became a lot more noticeable that he was given a quiet and a weaker edit after his HOH reign, where he is borderline invisible even on his boot week. In general, Kaysar is still kind of likable, but he just isn't as interesting here, and it shows that the faults that he had in Big Brother 6 are generally repeatable faults that he displayed here. In general, it just showed that he can't compete with most of the other All-Stars, and the slight arrogance and overestimation of his skill sets is a pretty strong issue of his. I found Week 6 to be relatively entertaining, though they definitely could have handled the HOH competitions in a better way, but I loved seeing how James had poorly played both sides while trying to save Danielle, and seeing the Danielle versus Janelle war continue, and seeing how Chilton weaponizes it, where they pull off the same stunt as they did last week here, was just really great. And then it ends up with the HOH being blindsided. And only the HOH being blindsided. It's just hilarious to me. Anyways, Erica wins HOH, but there were some technical issues with Boogie, Howie, Marcellus, and James's buttons, so it ended up being redone, though there is some controversy, since things were fine in the first 2 rounds, where Janelle was eliminated on fair and square. But anyways, she ends up winning the redone HOH comp, and Howie celebrates as obnoxiously as possible. Danielle and Erica are not happy, especially since Janelle couldn't play in the veto this week due to the punishment she took to win the veto last week. Danielle thinks she will be put up with Marcellus, though Erica thinks she will be nominated beside her. The rest of the Sobs are in the yellow room, where James pressures her to put up Marcellus. He mentions that he wanted to boot Marcellus week 3 on his HOH. And Janelle says no, because Danielle needs to go and Erica is the best way to send her home. James thinks Janelle is holding on to Marcellus, and Janelle thinks James is holding on to Danielle. Both are correct, and Howie also thinks that James is holding on to Danielle. Marcellus is hoping that Danielle goes home so he and Erica can make it another week. We have more Flirtman's content from Will and Janelle, where he baits in the sink, since that's the only place that had hot water at the moment, due to them taking it away during the veto competition last week. And he ends up spraying Janelle with the sink water. Mike speaks to James about how they have to push for Danielle to be nominated with Marcellus, which James agrees with, but mentions that Janelle will not put up Marcellus. James reveals that he wants Marcellus gone because he is a weak link for his goal to build an army against Janelle, which is very interesting and insightful. For the Have-Not competition, we have Nicole, June, and Marvin appearing, which was nice, though it sucked that all of BB5 was gone by this point, so there was no commentary there. Will speaks to Howie and Janelle, and he is told that the war is started with the float herd of George, Danielle, Erica, and Marcellus. Will suggests that they make a deal with Danielle to cut Erica and for them to make a deal to protect one another. Janelle and Howie are not here for it, and Janelle mentions that as long as Danielle is in the house, James isn't fully in their alliance, and he'll be loyal to them with her gone, which is a great read on her part. James mentions that he wants Marcellus on the block, and Janelle mentions that the floaters will be nothing without Danielle. James mentioned that Chicken George swore on his kids to keep Kaser, which Janelle said earlier in the episode, though the flashback that they showed proved that George didn't make any promise to Kaser. Janelle nominates Danielle and Erica for eviction, and Erica mentions in the diary room that she isn't a floater since she's a girl from a small town named Chill. Janelle rants about not liking floaters, which Erica is, and her hiding behind season 6, and James mentioning that Janelle nominating women is a part of her pattern, which is kind of true. Marcellus knows that a part of her speech was a backhanded slap at him too, and he knows that she will nominate him as a replacement nominee. Will tells Danielle that they are coming up with a plan for her to win the veto, and we see Mike and Erica showmatch for the first time, where Erica mentioned that they saw one another a few times before outside of the house, which could be indicating to the rumors that they're dating before the season, though Mike mentions in the diary room that things don't seem as they appear. Marcellus talks to Janelle about what happened to their final two deer, and she mentions that he's been talking shit about her, and he tells her that she's been talking shit about him. Janelle mentions that people like Mike and Will have told her that he's trashed her. Even Jace mentioned this during Marcellus's fight with him a few weeks ago. And Marcellus denies, knowing damn well that he did all of those things. She mentions that he is in an alliance with Danielle and Erica, where Marcellus mentions that his only alliance is the final two he made with Janelle in the first week. Marcellus mentions in the diary room that if he wins HOH, Janelle is toast. James knows that if he wins the veto, he has to use it on Danielle, but it will expose him to Janelle and Howie. James and Will throw the veto, though James makes it too obvious where everyone clowns him for it, so Danielle has the best chance at winning it. We have appearances by Nicole, once again, April, Scott, Jack, and Hardy. Danielle ends up winning the veto, even though she did nothing in the competition, which is this very funny, and Janelle is livid. Howie and Janelle are really mad at James, and Boogie tells Danielle that Howie uttered utter betrayal after the comp. Howie and Janelle gives Jace a piece of their mind where they call him out for not eliminating Danielle, but he eliminated Erica, and he also mentions that Will threw it as well, but he's not getting any of the blame. Howie claims that he is holding on to Danielle, which James denies, though it's true. Janelle mentions that she's going to put up Chilltown so Erica can go home. James tells Will that they need to speak to Janelle since she wants to put one of them up, but Will wants to keep Janelle pissed off and suspicious at James, since he is suspicious at James. Remember this for later. Chilltown goes up there to mention that Marcellus was planning on vetoing Danielle, which Howie and Janelle doesn't believe, and he also mentions that maybe they should get rid of James if they don't trust him enough. We see Operation Double Date, where Will wins over Janelle and Mike wins over Erica, and essentially use them, and they all bathe in the shower together. Janelle tells Marcellus that everyone wants her to put him up, and he'll be safe, but Marcellus mentions that if he goes up, he's going home, which is the correct read, and she mentions if she feels like that, he won't go up. If he feels like that, she won't put him up. Janelle mentions that she won't do it too well, but he's able to convince her to put him up. But he promises that Erica will go home. Danielle vetoes herself off the block, and Janelle nominates Marcellus as the replacement nominee. Marcellus does not feel safe on the block, and Erica feels a lot more safe with Marcellus being on the block. Marcellus tells Danielle that he needs her vote to stay, and she's in a bind since she told him beforehand that if she's going to let him go, she will tell him ahead of time. The Legion of Doom mentioned that they have to send Marcellus home, hoping that Erica wins HOH next week to send Janelle home, and then send Erica out after that. Mike mentions that he hasn't trusted Marcellus since day one. The nominees campaign for Chicken George's vote, and Marcellus mentions that Erica took Chicken George out of 2 competitions. Janelle tells Marcellus that he is safe, and Chilltown promised her their votes, and he's confused since she knows Chilltown has been after her since day 1. Marcellus speaks to Chilltown about how they promised Janelle their votes to keep him, but he tells them that every other person has mentioned to him in the past that they've wanted him out since day 1, but they of course tell him that he will be safe, but mentions that he's a gunner as soon as he leaves the conversation. Mike ends up winning the coup d'etat, and Marcellus is evicted in a unanimous 6-0 vote, where he mentions to Julie that his deal with Janelle was to take out Howie, Kaser, and James for her, which is interesting. Honestly, Marcellus just seemed very bitter and unpleasant during this season, and the social faults that were apparent in Big Brother 3 are very strong here. Though he got along with some of the women, he had an issue with getting along with the men in the house, and he didn't have many strong ties. He would have a decent strategic read or inkling here and there, but he also played very emotionally to the point where it deterred him and it built a bigger target on his back. I will give him props for being the one person in the entire season to have his foot on Chilton's neck the entire season, so I give him props for that. But in general, Marcellus wasn't as fabulous as he was in Big Brother 3. I think week 7 has a lot of the most iconic moments of the season happening during this week, and we definitely see the endgame start to form as the Legion of Doom has the last bit of success here before they start turning on one another. And of course, Janelle becomes more of an underdog at this point as she loses all of her allies. And we start to see Erica a lot more. Overall, it was a fun enough week. So Janelle was genuinely shocked that the entire house blindsided her to boot Marcellus, where Howie and Boogie mentioned that Marcellus left in a classist way, which is ironic, since what will happen with them at the end of the episode and in 2 days' time. Danielle bawls her eyes out about booting Marcellus, and James gives some half-hearted excuse to Janelle. Chicken George ends up winning HOH, and everyone is extremely shocked, and no one knows what he is going to do, especially since this is the double eviction, and the last time that the first version of the double eviction takes place, where it's done in 2 days. But he has to nominate immediately. George nominates James and Erica for eviction right off the bat, and George wants James gone. Most of the house wants Janelle and Howie gone, so people are really confused. Mike, Danielle, and James talks about how he's the worst person to have to do live nominations, and they mention that they need to convince him to backdoor Janelle. Howie and Janelle tell George that people were pushing for him to go up last week, and George wants to keep the nominations the same. James ends up winning the veto, and Mike, as well as some other house guests, speak to George about backdooring Janelle, but he refuses to do it. George and Erica are now in an alliance, since she tends to align with older men like Jack, though it's just BS on Erica's end. We'll suggest for Chicken George to nominate him, so Erica can go home, where Janelle and Danielle will continue to fight one another. George tells Janelle that the entire house wants her backdoored, including James, which shocks her. He says that he won't put her up because she's a good player and doesn't deserve that, but he not only wants to work with them, but he makes a promise where they make a promise to vote to keep Erica, which Janelle and Howie lie about, and they never intend on actually working with him. Erica is told by George that Will is going up, and she will stay. This causes Erica to panic, because she knows she will go home in that scenario. Erica tells Mike and Danielle that Will is going up, which causes Mike to freak out, since he and Will are the reason why George did not go up last week, apparently. Will forgot to tell Mike this, so while they're waiting for the veto ceremony, Mike tells George that Chilton is the reason why he didn't go on the block, and Janelle and Howie kind of admits that it was either Marcellus, Mike, or George as replacement options, while also mentioning the secret power. George pulls Erica and Danielle aside to mention that maybe he should nominate Howie, and they mention that he needs to do it. James vetoes himself, and George nominates Howie as the replacement nominee. Howie snaps since he mentions that George promised him twice, and he's listening to the 2 people who sold him out last week, though Howie was the one that saved him. He also rambles on about how it's a free week since he has the numbers, and they are outnumbered. Will mentions that Howie is doing more harm than good rambling about numbers, and how he should shut up while having Janelle secretly campaign for him. Chilton tells him that they're voting to keep him, and Will mentions that Erica needs to leave, and James mentions that he can't vote Howie out, where Mike also wants Howie out at this point. Howie is evicted in a 3-2 vote, and he's livid since he was blindsided, and it causes for a confrontational argument between himself and Mike Boogie. Throwing his head off his head, Mike calls Howie a class act sarcastically, and Howie mentions that Chilton's word is good as gold. Honestly, Howie is extremely unbearable this season, where his jokes are rarely funny. He's even worse strategically, he's very obnoxious, and honestly, people only liked him primarily because of the side he was on. And without there being a nerd herd or the friendship, he stands out a lot more in unlikability, and his behavior only gets worse and worse in the jury house. In general, he didn't offer much of anything to the season, and honestly, they could have done without him. Janelle is blindsided once again, and it is awkward after the confrontation that happened, though many people are Howie that Howie is gone. Mike Boogie ends up winning the HOH, though Will doesn't like that Mike won the HOH. Janelle is crying around the house, though she's claiming that she's fixing it, which I don't believe, to be honest, and Chilton does damage control about not telling her, since she would tell Howie and he would not react well, as his eviction would prove. It did prove. Chilton talks about how Mike is going to nominate James and Janelle, and whomever wins the veto, they'll send the other one home, but they want Janelle to win the veto. Will mentions in the diary room that the Legion of Doom is running the game, but he's going to destroy it because he doesn't trust James, who has an alliance with everyone in the house. Janelle talks to George about how she used Marcellus as a pawn, since everyone promised her that he would stay safe, and George is trying to find an ally, hoping that Janelle will be that person. Will tells Janelle that they're going to get James, but Janelle is going to be nominated alongside with him. Boogie nominates James and Janelle for eviction, and both nominees feel safe because they are relying on Chilton and have no choice but to. Mike, Will, and Janelle decide to team up against James, Danielle, and Erica, since Janelle is a bigger target still than the two of them, but she claims in the diary room that she's going after Chilton. At this moment, at least. We have the first of the many iconic OTEF competitions in Big Brother, where it's introduced here, and we have the infamous tussle between James and Janelle, but Janelle ends up winning the veto. James rants about this after the competition about how it's rigged, and Chilton is happy that their plan went through. Will mentions that Janelle whooped James's ass, and he's rigging it for Janelle. Erica speaks to Will and is more than fine with James going. Janelle vetoes herself off the block, and Mike nominates Chicken George as the replacement nominee. James feels confident that he will still be in the house on Thursday, and Chicken George isn't going to campaign. Danielle tells James that she's getting worried that things are going to flip. Will has a conversation with Danielle about how he is closer to her and Mike than James, and mentions that James is double dipping as he has concerns about what he speaks to Janelle about. Where Danielle mentions that James is very loyal to them, but Will says that James isn't going to tell them what he speaks to Janelle about, though Danielle is telling him that she will make James tell them what James speaks to Janelle about, if that makes sense. Danielle tries campaigning to Erica, where the latter is aware that she's aligned with James, but he isn't aligned to her. Pretty much, James is aligned to Danielle, but James is not aligned to Erica. Danielle mentions that James stuck his neck out for her in the veto to throw it to her, but Erica mentions that it was for Danielle, not Erica, so she really has no incentive here. Danielle knows that Erica is voting James out, so she makes a truce with Janelle, which she was unsure about. Janelle was unsure about Danielle, and she insinuates that Chilton are floaters, which is true, where they can handle them when they win HOHs. And it's interesting that Danielle made this truce with Janelle, since a lot of people are too prideful to link up with their enemies or their old enemies to kick out their new enemies. James and Janelle have a conversation about their rift throughout the season, and James campaigns to Janelle, where she says she will vote to keep him. James mentions that he isn't going to be a Howie if he goes home, and mentions to Chilton that Danielle has her worries, though they tell him that he has nothing to worry about. Will tells Danielle that James is double dipping and he needs to go, and Danielle is insisting that James needs to stay. She starts crying because her gut is telling her what is about to happen, but James has to stay for her game and just for sanity's sake. Apparently, Danielle really lost it and ended up speaking to the psych about this, because she was so affected about James going home. Will mentions to Boogie that this will be the move that will cause them to win or send them home, where James will go after them, but they need to manage Danielle's reaction, as there's no going back to keeping James. We have more content about Operation Double Date, where Mike is fine with Erica, as long as she does not get in the way of Chilton getting to the final two, and Will has Janelle under his thumb. Chilton mentions that they have their woman, and Danielle is the mother of the group, where they're going to have the women go at one another. Will thinks Erica is playing Mike, and Mike thinks that Janelle is playing Will. James is evicted in a 3-1 vote. He mentions in his eviction interview with Julie that Janelle sold him under the bus pertaining to Mr. and Mrs. Smith alliance to Jace, Allison, and a bunch of only people in the first week, so I thought that was an interesting tidbit. Honestly, James is still very whiny in this season, and I didn't like how he handled certain things, but I honestly think he improved his game by quite a bit. He was actually very loyal to his alliance for most of the season, and he made a lot of selfless moves that ended up biting him in the butt. And he actually improved on his social game while not being as reliant on competition. So it shows that he lets his social game, or he can let his social game and his bonds carry him far. He was the only one out of the Season 6 alliance to make relationships with the other side, and it helped him a lot, and I think they were very resentful of that. In general, I do enjoy what he contributed to the season, and he of course gives good diary rooms. So he shows that he can definitely hold his own against some of the best. So, yeah. Week 8 is a very tragic week, but it's in a good way. There's a lot of bittersweetness, a lot of bitterness, and a decent amount of drama where we have a nasty backstab. So Danielle is not handling James's eviction well at all, though Janelle feels fine after he tried to get her backdoored earlier in the week. Will mentions to everyone that he was responsible for the 3 jurors' evictions and mentions in the diary room that he wants to replicate his season 2 strategy. Boogie speaks to Danielle to comfort her about James's eviction, and she surmises that Janelle voted James out because of Will and mutters that Will's ass is hers after Boogie leaves the room. Erica ends up winning HOH and immediately tells Danielle that she is safe, where Janelle feels like it's the worst person to win the HOH. Will mentions that Boogie is going to start having to work on Erica to get Danielle out, and he's going to push for Danielle and George to be nominated, where Boogie mentions that Janelle will probably be nominated with George. Danielle speaks to Erica in her HOH room as she's pondering about why Janelle voted to evict James, especially when she told him she would vote to keep him, and it would cause Janelle to lose his jury vote. Danielle pushes for Will to go to Erica essentially, since Will convinced Janelle to not vote to keep James. Will attempts to make amends with a really angry Danielle, which they both acknowledge, but she keeps it calm and cool, which they also both acknowledge, as he apologizes since James was her friend, but he can't apologize for sending him home, since James would target him first in the alliance, and felt like he would push for Chilltown to go up if Janelle won HOH. Danielle says that she gets that it's a game, and she doesn't hold anything against him, but Will can tell that Danielle meant that she was going to get him out of the game, which she outright admits in the diary room. It's a really great and riveting conversation to watch. Janelle and Will flirt, where she starts to make more forward moves on him, where he teases her about loving him. Mike speaks to Erica about Danielle needing to go, and Erica mentions that she is putting him up, which he rejects, but she mentions that both Will and Danielle needs to go to jury. Sorry, when I say him, I'm referring that she's putting Will up. But Boogie rejects, and she mentions that they both need to go, but he doesn't want Will to go now. She mentions that she will kick his ass if she finds out that he is playing her. Will tells Mike that he needs to love make with Erica this week so they can get their way, and we see Will flirting with a camera in the backyard in boredom. Will tells Erica that Danielle is key at getting people to do her dirty work, and she will win if she gets to the final 2. Erica nominates George and Janelle for eviction. Neither nominee is shocked that they are on the block, but Will mentions that he wants Janelle in the house over Chicken George, but ultimately doesn't care outside of Chilltown as to who goes home. Will coaches Janelle on how to speak to Erica, and she tells Erica that if she wins, she'll go after Chilltown instead of her, which is a lie. The remains of the Legion of Doom talk, and Will suggests the idea of keeping Janelle, and Danielle immediately shoots it down, where Will notices that things have changed and have been strained with him and Danielle, especially after James's departure, and they don't trust one another whatsoever. Danielle finds it odd that Erica won't put up Chilltown, and now they want to keep Janelle. Danielle swears on her kids to Erica that she'll take her to the final 2, and mentions that if she wins the veto, she'll take George off. Will is put up and is voted out in a 2-1 vote, and she calls him the devil, a la Roddy in BB3, and mentions that BB3 Danielle is back. She mentions that the gun players will say, "I'm sorry," after they cut someone. Will mentions to Janelle that he will get Boogie to get Erica to send Danielle home after she wins the veto, and Erica speaks to Mike about sending Danielle home next week, where Chilltown wins HOH, but she wants Janelle gone this week, though Mike tries to get her to send Danielle out this week. Janelle wins the veto, though Danielle was very close, and will actually try to win this one, whereas Mike threw this competition, and Erica is extremely worried. Erica and Janelle speak, and they mention that Danielle needs to go, where Chilltown celebrates in the storage room. Mike and Will tell her that she needs to send Danielle home, and Erica mentions that she can't, but it will cause Erica to get fourth again. That's what Will says to her, since Janelle is coming after Chilltown and George is irrelevant. Erica speaks to Mike and is worried about keeping Chilltown together at this point, since she doesn't want to get Diane. In the storage room, Erica says that Danielle isn't going up, but she needs to think. A day later, Danielle approaches Erica since she sees that Erica is a panicked mess, so she asks her what's wrong. Erica replies that there's a time where you have to make moves that you didn't anticipate on having to make, and Danielle immediately realizes that Erica is putting her up, because Erica cannot be her in the end, which is what Erica told her. Danielle gets drunk in the evening and rants to Chicken George about Erica being loyal to Chilltown, and it doesn't make sense to nominate her, and warns George about not trusting Erica after she leaves and tries to make it seem like, oh, I protected you, George. Erica watches the conversation as she smokes, and the two of them start arguing after George leaves, noticing that they needed to clear the air. Erica mentions that Danielle is showing her true colors when she told Danielle she was an option, though Danielle said that Erica mentioned that she would go up. Danielle is sad that she made a commitment in her eyes, and Danielle says that she will not give Erica her jury vote for doing this. Erica says that nothing has even happened yet, and Danielle says it hurts because it came from her and not from Chilltown and Janelle. From the feed version that I watched, Danielle literally repeated the same 4 or 5 things over and over and over again, and it went on for a very long time. But she also mentioned how Danielle was supposed to be Erica's Jack, and Erica was supposed to be Danielle's Jason. Erica wants Mike to console her, but he sends her to speak to Will, where the two of them go in the HOH room and the washroom, and they lock Danielle out of the HOH room, where she calms herself down and Will spends the night in the HOH room, so Danielle cannot get the last word. Janelle vetoes herself off the block, and Erica nominates Danielle as the replacement nominee in a very tense veto ceremony. Will and Boogie get Janelle and Erica in the storage room individually and gave them both honorary memberships, and for keys, they do the same thing with Chicken George in the kitchen. Danielle asks Mike if they're going to keep her, since she hopes that they would tell her if she's going. She asks Will the same thing, and of course they both tell her that she is safe. Danielle is evicted in a unanimous 3-0 vote. While Danielle started the season off very sloppy, she proved that she could definitely adapt her game, she can improve her social game, and she can play in the modern era, while being a legitimate jury threat to win, and also changing her strategy up a bit, where she's attempting to be more honorable and less cutthroat, though she still had her moments. In general, she was still very entertaining, she was still very good in her diary rooms, and she came off as more of a human and not a gamebot or a massive villain, so the season humanized her a lot. Though seeing her downfall here was very hard to watch, but it was very enthralling at the same time. Danielle held her crown as being one of the best players in the season, especially because she didn't pregame, and we saw a lot of the people who didn't pregame go home very early on this season, so props to her. It is the double eviction, and it's the version of the double eviction that we associated with today. Janelle went to the HOH and is pulled by Will to have a conversation about who to put up, where he tells her to put up George and Erica, though she wanted to put up Erica and Mike, but he buttered her up about being the hottest and the best competitor of Big Brother. Will tries to win the veto but breaks his thumb, causing Erica to win the veto, and of course she takes herself off the block. Since there's no one else to nominate really, Mike is named the replacement nominee, and Chicken George is sent home in a unanimous 2-0 vote. While I wouldn't have cared to have Chicken George on the season or to have him removed whatsoever, he was a fun enough presence. He was very affable and was kind of comedic relief, as he was just the observer watching everything that happened, though he won a few competitions overall. In general, he was kind of irrelevant to the season and was on his own island the entire time, but he is harmless essentially. Things are definitely starting to wind down by week 9, and while there is a big move that is made, the journey to get there isn't the most pleasant, and the end game starts to have people who end up going to the very end that isn't very satisfying, and I don't care a whole lot for Operation Double Date enough as it is, so to see an entire week of it wasn't my favorite. Anyways, Erica mentions that Mike will take her to the final 2. She knows that she cannot beat Will or Janelle at the end, which is an accurate read, though he mentions in the diary room that he isn't taking her to the final 2. We see a bunch of content about Erica and Mike hooking up, and he talking about being the king of showmances as he hooked up with Krista in Big Brother 2 and was going between Diane and Erica for his option this season, but Diane got evicted early, so he moved in on Erica, though there were rumors that they were dating before the season even started. He mentions the number one rule of showmances is to never get feelings for the girl, though he did have feelings for Krista back in the day. Will and Janelle continue to flirt around, though they mention that they are dating other people in real life. Erica talked about how she was a smoker years ago, but her grandfather died due to it, so she stopped smoking. I do remember her mentioning that she wasn't a smoker in Big Brother 4, but she ended up picking it up again due to the stress of this season. Mike mentions that smoking is extremely unattractive to him, and he doesn't like what her mouth tastes like due to smoking whenever they kiss. Mike ends up winning HOH, and Chotan celebrates in the storage room because no matter which woman wins the POV, the other one is going home. The final four get into a hot tub, and Will and Janelle encourage Mike and Erica to have a baby together, though Will makes a dig about hearing a tick-tock, which is Erica's biological clock ticking. After they leave, Janelle flirts with Will, and she's clearly drunk, but she is too forward on him, and he rejects her. They start arguing, since she thinks that he's treating her poorly, and she's a spoiled brat. Will is now worried that he will be evicted if she wins the POV, since Operation Double Date worked too well, where Janelle clearly wanted to take it to the next level with Will. Erica overhears them talking in the storage room, and Mike rats her out. Mike and Erica talk more, and she thinks that they will have something after the show, where Mike mentions that Erica is going to be extremely disappointed once the season ends, and mentions that he is going to have. Chilltown tells the same thing to Janelle and Erica about how they both need to beat the other in veto to vote the other woman out, and Erica mentions as a joke that they probably told Janelle the same thing. Mike nominates Janelle and Erica for eviction. Erica is worried about getting evicted since she was evicted on week 9 and at 4th place on Big Brother 4, and Janelle mentions that Will emotionally has her and knows that he uses that to his advantage. Janelle ends up winning the final 4 veto. Apparently, the house guests complained about the pictures kept on dropping, but production allowed it because Janelle won it, from what I read on the feeds. Janelle wins the veto and immediately kisses Will on the lips, which is another sign that Operation Double Date went too far. Erica tells Janelle that she knows she's evicting her, and Janelle says that Erica shouldn't be so sure. The two of them talk in the HOH room and compares notes about Chilltown, with Will being the biggest liar of the house, and Erica promises to take Janelle to the final 2. Will saw them go in the house to get the wine and noticed that they didn't make eye contact with him, so he knows he's going home. Janelle takes herself off the block and votes to evict Will. While I definitely had my issues and faults with his Big Brother 2 game, Will more than made up for it here, where he showed that he can play an aggressive game being on top, and he was able to manipulate a lot of people and actually mastermind everything that happened in the season, which wasn't the case in Big Brother 2. He showed that he could definitely adapt to the quicker pace of Big Brother and how much it changed within the 5 years, and can play with the veto and a bunch of other twists put into play. While he definitely did pregame heavily and would often use the businesses that he and Mike had with one another and money to incentivize people to work with him, he definitely was a smooth sailor, as he was great socially, great strategically, and actively improved. He was still entertaining, though you can definitely tell a lot of moments he was a lot more contrived with the diary room and in the camera, where he was clearly putting on a show. No matter what, he's the MVP of the season, and this season is why he is one of the best in my opinion. At the same time, I do think flirting with someone who's not only in a relationship, and you're in a relationship, but a very emotional person in general, was always going to be a teetering line, and was always going to be something that would eventually blow up in his face, and it definitely did here. Week 10 kind of sucks, I'm not going to lie. I think it was a pretty poor way of ending the season, and it just showed that the endgame really wasn't all that it cracked up to be. Anyways, Mike does not handle Will's eviction well at all, and calls Erica a hoe after she says checkmate to him, but ultimately admits that he can dish it, but can't take it. Mike ends up dropping out of the first part of the final HOH extremely quickly, pulling off what Richard Hatch did in Survivor Borneo, which caused Janelle to get distracted as she got startled, causing Erica to end up winning part 1, where she wanted to throw it to Janelle. Erica and Janelle hope that the latter can beat Mike in part 2. Despite their best efforts, or mainly Janelle's best efforts, Mike wins part 2 of the final HOH over Janelle, meaning that she's out of the running for the final HOH. Erica ends up linking up back with Mike at this point, since Janelle isn't an option anymore, and she hates that she's still attracted to him. Mike ends up winning the final HOH and evicts Janelle. While Janelle was as sassy and somewhat as likable as ever, she was extremely frustrating to watch. Her gameplay this season was so all over the place. For one good read she had, she would make 2 poor moves, and yet again, her social game is pretty poor, where while it was cool that she had a pre-game alliance, not only with Chilltown and with having 3 of her prior allies from last season on, but she did not integrate herself with the rest of the cast, and she had issues with most of the women on the cast yet again. And Marcellus was turned off by her behavior, causing that relationship to suffer as well. And then she was calling most of the house flirters because they didn't come in with a bunch of their allies, and because she didn't integrate herself socially with the cast. Overall, I do find her competition wins to be very impressive, though she put herself in a position where she needed those competition wins to make it a decent amount of time in the season, so yeah. But either way, Janelle is one of the MVPs of the season. Marcellus asks them both about what was their best move strategically. Erica mentions convincing Janelle to boot Will, and Mike mentions that it was not using the special veto, though that was taken away by production because he told Will about it, though they didn't address that on the show. And he also mentions the aligning with Janelle at the end stretch. George asks Mike if he's going to propose to Erica like he proposed to Krista on the live show, and he says no. George asks Erica about why she told him that he was safe and then voted him out, and she responds that they didn't have a deal the week after she told him that, and Mike was more valuable to her game. Will shares a phone call with Boogie about how the latter being in the final two, so he essentially doesn't ask anything. Janelle asks Erica if kissing butt and throwing competitions was a part of her strategy, and Erica mentions that the only competition she threw was the HH comp to Danielle, but she had Janelle's back and would have taken her to the final two, which Janelle thinks is BS. James asks Erica that she was disgusted with Allison's gameplay, and it was why she couldn't vote for her in Big Brother 4, but also asks her about how her strategy was any different. Erica responds that it wasn't her intention to flirt or hook up, especially as strategy, but she just likes Mike. But she came in and had no one, so she had to float to make it through the house. Danielle asks Erica if it was her decision or Chilton's to get rid of her, and Erica responds that it was her idea. And Danielle asks Boogie that he should justify himself for telling her that he will be her Jason, where he would have never scumbagged her. Mike responds that they should make a deal right now where she should give him his vote, especially if he goes home to watch on his TV, where he would see that she did not have more than one Jason, as he's pretty sure that she had James, Erica, and Boogie at some point as her Jasons, and he can't apologize for taking out one of the best players in Big Brother. But if he is wrong, he'll split half of the money with her. In addition to that, he and Will always talked about splitting the money with a lot of the cast, and that was used as a strategy as well. Howie asks Boogie why he sent him home, despite him mentioning bros before hoes, and Boogie mentions that when he saw Howie in the endurance comp, he told Will to send him home, since no one was nominating Howie, and he deserves the gameplay that got George to nominate him. Erica's final speech is about how she came in not knowing what her strategy was and realized that she couldn't go after the Puppet Master, since he had a lot of puppets, so she wanted to go to the Final Four to boot the Puppet Master herself. But she couldn't do that, so she convinced Janelle to do so. Mike's final speech is about how he lied to everyone but Chicken George and Will, since everyone else was a part of Chilton whether they knew it or not, and when they started figuring it out, that was when they went home. He thanks the house guests and mentioned that he took something from each and every one of them, mentioning that they need to vote like all-stars and to reward his gameplay. Mike Boogie wins the season by a 6-1 vote. I definitely think Erica was an insipid casting choice for this season, and we didn't see much of her for the first half of the season. I guess it was a pro that she didn't make any racist comments this time, but ugh. Anyways, I do think she got a lot of unwarranted flack for her gameplay, especially because she didn't have any allies entering the season. And while she did pre-game, she was still left on her own devices. But I will say that she got too blinded by Chilton, and when she won HOH, she misused it very poorly. And of course, she tried to rewrite history, and the jury just wasn't believing it. At the end of the day, I did kind of feel bad with how the jury kind of slut-shamed her and made her feel awful for just liking Mike. Mike Buggy was arguably the most WTF casting choice for this season, especially since not only was he an early boot, but he was from a very early season, and he wasn't even one of the standouts, despite being an early boot. But we all know that Will made an ultimatum, and production couldn't get Nicole or Hardy to agree, where I think they would have been fine casting them and removing Boogie and Will. Anyways, Mike Boogie learned a lot from Will, and he was definitely guided throughout the season. And while he definitely did put his effort, especially socially, and he had his own strategic moves, it did come off like he was more of the sidekick, and he followed Will's lead. And he was perfectly fine losing to Will, and he had to pay for himself in the final week of the season, so that wasn't very impressive there. But Mike Boogie definitely improved, and he definitely deserved to win over Erica. In conclusion, this season is like cotton candy to me. It is good, you enjoy it, but the depth and the meatiness just isn't there. Unless you have to really, really, really read between the lines. Since if you just go based off the episodes, you're not going to find it there. On one end, this is a very sad way to end the era, since all these great characters either don't return ever again or they return in diminishing results, not only as players but as characters. But at the same time, I do think it wrapped up a lot of their arcs pretty well, whether they ended on a strong note or on a pretty sad note. And by this point in Big Brother history, they definitely got their format, and it was interesting to see how it evolved overall. But in general, All Stars is still an enjoyable season, though it's not one of my favorites for a variety of reasons that I've delved into in this review. As I think the concept of All Stars is kind of just grating, and the pre-gaming really, really, really affected the season, but they didn't want to show a lot of it on the episodes. So they kind of created a lot of false narratives. And you definitely notice that there's a shift as Shapiro either left during the season or after the season. And it would only get worse with Big Brother 8 onwards, where Alison Grauner and Rich Meehan completely took over. So, of course, I'm going to do my Game Player tiers ranking of the All Stars cast, but I'm also going to rank everyone from the first era of Big Brother based on their gameplay. So, everyone from Big Brother 2 to Big Brother 7 will be ranked in one video, but that could come out either after Big Brother 8, Big Brother 9, Big Brother 10, or so on and so forth. It just depends on how long it takes me to make that video. Thank you all for watching and following my journey, and I'll definitely be back with something very soon.